free to move around the boat. Just please appreciate though, we're on a boat and therefore liable to sudden movement. With that in mind, we will kindly ask you do not stand upon any of the seats, lean too far over or climb upon the side railings, and for any young children aboard, please just ensure they do not run around the vessel. So, as we back our way out of the historic dockyard, we're going to start our tour off by looking over our right-hand side. There you go, try and work out which side's the right. The right-hand side is the harbour entrance towards the Spinnaker Tower. So if you can't see the tower, you might want to spin around 180 degrees so you don't get neck cramp halfway through the tour. Anyway, we're actually going to start though, looking at HMS Warrior. Warrior was built back in 1859, commissioned into the Royal Navy however in 1860, which actually makes her part of our Victorian fleet. Now, back in the Victorian times, the Royal Navy was divided into three distinct sections. There was a red fleet, a white fleet, and a blue. Warrior was the flagship to the red fleet, the highest ranking of all three. So it's deemed until this very day that she should still fly the iconic red ensign flag above the captain's cabin. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, as we go around this corner here on our right hand side, let's take this opportunity to welcome you all to Her Majesty's Naval Base Portsmouth. Otherwise known as HMS Nelson, today it plays home to roughly 64% of our Royal Naval Surface Fleet. Now the first jetty of the naval base, that's this one here on the right. It is known as the South Railway Jetty, and it gets its term because it used to play home to, or used to be as far south as the railway line in Portsmouth used to extend to. That was though all the way until many years ago, when the railway line that was here was completely removed, with the only remaining part of it being a blue threaded building, which we'll see in a few minutes' time. But obviously with the train line now gone, the jetty's instead become the home to the large red brick building in the background, the one just the other side of the warship here. The building is known as Semaphore Tower, and it plays home to arguably the most important people within the naval base. This is the group known as the Queen's Harbour Master, or QHM for short. And these are the guys and girls that have total control of every single shipping movement in and around the harbour. That goes from the start of this harbour tour right up to the movements of all the warships, cross-channel ferries and Isle of Wight traffic. So basically, everything that moves in the harbour goes to those guys first. Anyway, just on the outer quay so the first warship in the naval base, D645. Now, as you can see by the flags, she's obviously not a British ship, she's in fact a French naval ship. And this is the Le Montpiquet. Now, she is an anti-submarine destroyer, only one of two of her class left in operation. They entered service, or they were designed and built back in the late 1980s. There were originally 7 of them, but 5 have already been removed from service, with only 2 remaining, this being one of them. So she currently goes around the world. She obviously does mainly work for finding and destroying submarines, and she has various equipment on board that makes her very similar to one of our frigates, which we'll see a little bit later on. Just to run through some of the weapons: big cannon on the bow, that's called a 100mm gun. Then at midships, the tubes you can see just behind the funnel, they are the Exocet anti-ship missiles. Then the sort of rockets you can see hanging over the stern are her rolling airframe anti-aircraft missiles. So all in all, she is pretty heavily armed, very similar to our frigates, which we'll see a little bit later on. Next up is Victory Jetty. This area of course gets its name because of HMS Victory, which we'll see located in the background. Today, Victory is sat inside dry dock number 2. There she's lined with concrete, it's in fact open to the public. And every year well over 250,000 people will in fact roam round her and will explore the various places whilst on board. So if you want, you can go look inside the captain's cabin at the stern, you can go and see where the crew used to work, you can even make your way onto the top deck to see the exact spot when Nelson was shot. Anyway, we're not going to go into too much detail about the Victory, because of course you can go on board it yourselves and have a look around. Instead, we're going to move on to a ship that unfortunately you can't get on board. And of course, I'm on about our brand new aircraft carrier, HMS Queen Elizabeth. So, R08, which is the first and lead ship of the Queen Elizabeth class of super aircraft carrier. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is actually the largest warship ever built for our Royal Navy. That's because she weighs in at approximately 70,000 tonnes. It actually makes her 3 times the size of one of our previous Invincible class of carrier. Now, to be slightly more specific, she is 280 metres long, and at her widest point, she is 70 metres, making her one of the widest ships anywhere in the world. Now, the Queen Elizabeth is going to be leaving very soon. We've just found out It's going to be tomorrow. Tomorrow, about midday, she's due to depart the harbour and she'll be heading across to America. She'll be over there for a grand total of up to 4 months. So this takes her all the way pretty much up until Christmas, in fact. Now, while she's over there, she's going to be conducting what are known as her fixed wing trials. This, of course, is the process where they test and trial all of her aircraft. And the aircraft that will eventually go on board her are known as the F-35B Lightning II jets. Now, they have been chosen in particular because they have the ability to land and take off vertically. A little bit like your old Sea Harrier jump jets, and I'm sure a few of you will remember those. So all being well, these aircraft will go on by the end of the year, and she should then go into active service at the beginning of next year. When she does, she'll operate with up to 1,600 crew and up to 60 aircraft in total. So as we approach the bow of the Queen Elizabeth, you get to see one of her most iconic features. That, of course, is the ski ramp. Now that there is designed to help get those aircraft into the sky with a heavier payload of arms. A lot of people then often wonder, well, why do they need a ski ramp if the aircraft can take off vertically? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Well, the reason being is when an aircraft takes off vertically, it burns a lot of fuel. It's not really that practical. So whenever possible, they would much rather take off like a conventional plane. That's where the ski ramp comes into play. It sort of gives them an extra kick into the sky as they're taking off, so they can carry a heavier payload of arms or more fuel on board. However, when they come into land, well, that's a whole other ball game. Unfortunately, 280 metres simply isn't a very long runway. So if they tried landing like a conventional plane, they'd touch down on one end and then fall off the other, which isn't ideal. So to avoid that from happening, they'd come into land like a helicopter would. They'd land vertically, and that's why we've gone for the F-35Bs. The Americans, though, they do things slightly different. On their carriers, they use a system known as arrestor wires, which are basically long wires they lay out across the flight deck, and as the aircraft come into land, they hook onto them, and it brings them to a very abrupt halt. We just decided not to go for that system, and that's why we've got the F-35Bs. Anyway, for now, we've come right in front of the Queen Elizabeth, and as we do so, you get one of the best photo opportunities from here. So if you've got your cameras or your phones, feel free to take as many photos as you like. But the one you want to try and get is looking straight down the bow of the ship, or the front of her, and you want to try and get those flight decks nice and evenly spaced either side. So if you've got your phones, definitely well worth trying to get a photo of that one.
Yeah, sitting on the top.
Anyway, we're now progressing towards her starboard side, or the right-hand side of her. As we do so, you can see some of her you can see certain parts of the ship that you might not have already been able to see, but most notably her two towers. She's currently the only aircraft carrier in the world to have two. The forward one that we can quite clearly see, that is the bridge. That's obviously where they drive the ship from. And the one behind there is known as FlyCo, which is the flight control centre. This acts like air traffic control at an airport. So, there we go, ladies and gents. That is the Queen Elizabeth, a £3.1 billion super aircraft carrier. Like I say, good job you're on this tour today, because this time tomorrow you wouldn't have seen her. Anyway, moving along. Next up is D35. D35, this is HMS Dragon. She's one of 6 daring class Type 45 destroyers. Now she, alongside her sister ships, were only built a few years ago. Done so though at a cost of £1 billion, making her one of the most expensive destroyers on this planet. However, for that significant price tag, you do actually get some of the most advanced destroyers in the world. And firstly, just take a look at the side of her. You'll notice how her superstructure is carved into these funny angles. This is because she incorporates stealth technology. And a little bit like a stealth bomber, as radar waves go flying towards the side of these ships, they hit those angles and then get pinged off into lots of different directions, allowing her to appear virtually invisible when detected by an enemy's radar. Now, talking of radars, you can quite clearly see hers on board. The main one, though, is the big grey ball on the top of the tallest mast. That's known as the Samson radar, and it's said to be one of the most sophisticated and powerful missile tracking systems anywhere in the world. Supposedly, from where the ship's sat today, it can monitor up to 200 miles away. That's the equivalent of being from here in Portsmouth to as far away as approximately Paris. Within that range, it can then monitor over 3,000 football-sized objects travelling at speeds of up to Mach 3, which of course is 3 times the speed of sound. And then with that information, she can relay it back in 3D to the clever computers on board. Now, should a threat be detected by it can launch off her Sea Viper missiles, which are found inside that rather large grey box you can see up on the bow there. She carries about 40 of them in total. So, ladies and gents, we're now about to approach the final warship in the naval base. As we approach her stern, this is F237 HMS Westminster. She's one of 13 Duke-class Type 23 frigates. Now, she, alongside her sister ships, were designed back in the late 1980s. But obviously, back then, her role was for ASW, which stands for Anti-Submarine Warfare. Basically, this is our equivalent to the French ship we saw at the beginning of the tour. As we go past, you'll notice there's a few similarities. Starting right at the stern here, that little yellow thing poking out the back of that. That is a sonar radar. That's what they drag along behind them to hopefully find submarines. Now, you would have seen a very similar system on board the French ship. This though is painted white and it looks a little bit like a drone does. But as we come towards the bow of her, and over the most recent of years, these frigates, as our Royal Navy's gone a lot smaller than what it once was, have proven to be very good multi-role vessels. So they don't just go looking for submarines these days, as they are very good multi-role vessels. Plain simply, they're really heavily armed. As we come towards her bow, you will see most of those weapon systems come into place. Firstly, right from the front, you've got the big grey cannon, that's called a Vickers Mark 8, 4.5-inch naval sea gun. That one gun alone is in fact more powerful than a complete broadside of a World War II destroyer. It can launch off a 22-kilogram shell with pinpoint accuracy as far away as 14 miles. Then behind that, you've got the box with the doors on the sides. That houses the Sea Wolf anti-aircraft missiles. Then you have the cluster of 4 tubes, which are the anti-ship harpoon missiles, the same as what the Exocets do. This is just our version of them. Then we have at midships a 30mm auto cannon, and then below the waterline we carry Mark 11 depth charges as well as torpedoes. So all in all, very heavily armed. Now, unfortunately, she does mark the end to our active fleet. There are a few more ships further along the keels. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get too close to them because you've probably seen behind us we have an inward-bound cross-channel ferry, and we don't want to get in her way because, well, she's a lot bigger than us. But as you follow the keel along, you come to 2 final ships within the naval base. One sat the other side of the keel, that is the former RFA Diligence. RFA standing for Royal Fleet Auxiliary, which means she would support the Royal Navy all around the world. Her role as a forward repair ship, though, would be go along and repair any broken down warships. Unfortunately, her days of working alongside the Navy have now come to an end, as she has been deemed surplus to requirements. So she's waiting for her fate to be decided. Then the SD Victoria, which is the black and white vessel with the yellow cranes on the back, is a worldwide support ship used by our armed forces, and in particular the SBS, which is the Special Boat Service, used by them to transport round some of the high-speed launchers, which you can actually see laid down the back deck of that at the moment. Then from that point onwards, you move away from the naval base and you enter into the commercial part of the harbour. The browny green coloured sheds in the background, that's part of Portico, which is the container port here in Portsmouth. See one of our container ships sat alongside at the moment, offloading her various goods into the sheds, where they then be distributed all around the country as is required. Next door to Portico is then Portsmouth's International Port, otherwise known as the cross-channel ferry port. This is the second busiest cross-channel ferry port in the UK, once again coming second to Dover. Now at the moment just the one cross-channel ferry alongside the Mont Saint-Michel, but of course we are about to have the Etretat join us as well. The Mont Saint-Michel, she goes to Caen in northern France. The Etretat, she goes to Le Havre, again in northern France. Both have similar journey times, around about 6.5 to 7 hours-ish. The Mont Saint-Michel's been alongside for about half an hour now, so she's going to be here for about another hour, and then the Etretat will be alongside for about an hour and a half. Anyway, moving back to the Royal Navy, in the right is D23. This is HMS Bristol. Now, she was the only Bristol-class destroyer to ever be built. That's because back in the 60s, due to defence cuts, her 3 sister ships were all scrapped on paper. However, during her lifetime in the Royal Navy, she was the escort to the aircraft carriers during the Falklands, and was also the Hong Kong guard ship for a number of years. Sadly though, she eventually found herself to be decommissioned, only though to be recommissioned a few years later as a static training ship, which she is today. And every year, thousands of sea cadets come down to this area of Portsmouth and undergo various training exercises whilst on board. Right, well, ladies and gents, we are now going to be making our way down towards the Gospel side of the harbour. So for this short part of the journey, I will be able to leave you in peace from the commentary. However, if you do have any questions, do not hesitate to ask any member of crew on board. If not, just sit back, relax, and I will be back to talk to you in a few moments' time. Also, if you do want to take the opportunity to grab yourself a drink from behind the bar, by all means, please do so. But if you're on the top deck, you might see one of the two of the crew wandering around. If so, just grab their attention. They've got a tray of ice cold drinks up here with them as well. Do feel free to pop over if you do require it. If not, just sit back, relax, and I'll be back to talk to you all in a few minutes' time.